And I think the point I really want to emphasize from this session is that training is a form of stress. You stress your body physically, and that's the stimulus, and hope is that you then allow for sufficient recovery, so that stimulus will provoke super compensation and adaptations from your body, whether it be your muscles, your cardiovascular system, proprioception, whatever. But the main thing I really want to stress is your body doesn't differentiate between forms of stress. Okay, they all provoke a similar reaction, some in more exaggerated ways than others. So all of it together, your work stress, relationship stress, family issues, training stress, personal issues, tax issues, they all come from just one pot of energy, and that's your body's ability to produce energy. It all comes from the same place effectively. And so all those stress factors that I talked about, family, work, personal stuff, training, they all leach energy from that one pot of energy. Okay? And what we like to do as humans, I don't know, dogs might do this as well. Quite a strange phrase to use. We like to separate the spheres of our life out, and we like to pretend that they operate independently of one another. And we kind of pretend that something in our personal life isn't going to affect our ability to perform. It's just not true, guys, because emotional energy, again, comes from the same place. Okay? So just because you're stressing yourself physically doesn't mean that emotional stress over the course of the day hasn't already knackered you out. So those spheres of our life don't operate independently. They all affect one another. And if you try and fight that reality, you can find yourself in big trouble physically, hormonally, emotionally. And so when you put it simply, when one stress factor is in significant ascendancy, so for example, you're working late regularly, you're really high stress environment at work, or you're having personal issues, or family issues, your bereavement, whatever, you will simply have less capacity to train. Sometimes you notice it, sometimes you don't. Okay, sometimes you get lucky, and it might be after the fact that you kind of realise, well, actually, I was pretty tired. But generally speaking, you'll find out. Your body will tell you that, one of the British phrases is you're burning the candle at both ends, and normally that means you're up late, early in the morning, but it implies in this context as well, if you're using energy all over the place, you're soon going to run out. And this is why pro athletes do everything they can do everything they can to minimize other forms of stress in their lives. It's why it becomes their job and not their hobby. So they don't have to worry about financial problems. They don't have to worry about, fitting in training around meetings and calls, etc. I imagine they still do to a certain extent, but ultimately it's always justified that their training will take precedence. It's important to understand that it's okay to accept that you can't do everything at 100 miles an hour all the time. Cycling and triathlon does tend to appeal to certain types of people, high performing people. They're probably good at most things, but almost always very determined, very disciplined people, and they feel like they should be able to handle everything all the time. But giving yourself permission to scale down or miss sessions can be one of the smartest and most beneficial things you can do for your mental health. So that's kind of one of the main takeaways I want to give you guys from this session is accepting that you can't handle everything is okay. And if you put it this way, what if your mate said that, you know, they had to drop their training down, had to scale their training down because they just couldn't handle everything on their plate. You know, they go through their list of issues. Like, you'd have to be a pretty cold bastard to then say, oh no mate, you should be training. You know, you get those hours up. Like, that's just never going to happen. And if it did, like, I would suggest you don't want to associate yourself with that person anymore. So if you know, there's always that phrase that if you wouldn't advise somebody else to do it, then you shouldn't really do it yourself. And that's actually something that I often get reminded of by those around me. You know, if I'm having issues with training or whatever, illness, whatever it is, you know, people will say to me, well, would you advise your clients to train? What would you advise them to do? That's always a good reminder for me to kind of get the ego out of the way and make a more objective and sensible decision. So that's the main thing I wanted to get across to you guys, is it's okay not to be able to handle everything all the time. And then sometimes when other stress factors are in the ascendancy and taking over, it's okay to to reduce your training load, or to reduce intensity or volume, whatever it is you need to do to be able to handle things more easily. That's absolutely fine. And I'll talk a little bit more. I will come on to some practical steps that you can take in terms of managing your training and approaching your training to kind of deal with that issue. But the starting point is just accepting that you might not be able to handle everything. You might not be able to train at the same level as you usually do if you're doing kind of 13, 14, 15 hour days at work, or you're going through quite a traumatic personal event. So it's all fair enough.